Hello, everyone. Welcome to our unique language learning tool named LanGuard. First, I'm going to introduce our team. I'm Hunter Eastman. I worked on a bit of the front end and the back end, and also kind of ran our Jira board as the product manager. This is Cole here. He worked as our chief back-end engineer. He did a lot of design on our back-end architecture, as you'll see later. We also have Noah Liebers. He worked on our neural network the most. Will Swiston, kind of our chief front-end engineer. Callan Olson, who is also very much a front-end engineer. And then Cody Binder, who also did a lot of front-end development. With that, we'll continue on. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the people who would be interested in this sort of project. So since we are an entrepreneurial team, we don't have a direct stakeholder. So for us, our stakeholders are mostly the people who are interested in using our application, as well as people who already own applications in this sort of space. We also have the UNL School of Computing Senior Design Company. Since we still did have to meet a bunch of different class requirements. And we also worked with Don't Panic Labs, a small company in Lincoln, Nebraska, who helped us go through our idea creation and kind of our initial development phase. With that, I'll talk a little bit more about that idea development phase. So when we met with Don't Panic Labs, they had us go through multiple different thought exercises, and we came up with three main application ideas, which we then discussed as to which one would be the best potential for being marketable. So the idea we went with is LanGuard, but we also discussed doing GamerBoxed or RC Part Picker, which were two ideas that kind of built off of other applications we had seen before, but in a different industry space. So now I'll start talking about the problem that we're trying to fix with this, with LanGuard. So learning a new language is very difficult. There's a lot of solutions out there for it, but a lot of them are either require in-person classroom learning, or they're not as tailored to your specific skill set, or they just like teach you the language and you can't really get any real world practice. So LanGuard very much fits into that role and offers a solution. So we built a website that gives users articles based on their different preferences. The main thing being the difficulty of different articles. So the use case of this is that they can learn a new language that is at their skill level, while also learning about whatever they want to learn, whether that's news or possibly other articles as well. We built this with a React front end and a DynamoDB instance on the back end, and then we used a robust API with AWS Lambdas to facilitate the data transfer. On the back end side, we have a neural network, which actually ranks the articles for their difficulty. We trained it on a data set that had about 5,000 articles and ranked them from 1 to 4. We were able to achieve only like a 65% testing accuracy on a data set of about like 1,000 articles. So it's not the most ideal thing, which is why we also have some backup scores, as you'll see later. The other thing that we're missing is we plan to get user feedback after they actually read an article, and we don't have that implemented yet. So that's where our neural network would improve. And with that, I'll hand it over to Cole to talk more.
Thank you, Hunter. So to kind of talk about how a new article is added to our system, there are kind of two components to it. We obviously have the usual tech stack. That's kind of our front end, the client, with the server, interacting with the AWS stuff. But then we also kind of have the article scraping component. So as you can see there, you have kind of the article link, which is picked up by a web scraper that we've programmed. It's in Python. And then it sends it to kind of this other script that we call the create new article script. And what that does, it actually calls the prediction model, gets the output from that, and then sends it to the Lambda function, which then inserts it into the DynamoDB database. So that way, we kind of have one database that has all the article prediction stuff in it, as well as the article content itself. Probably go to the next slide with that. And we do kind of have the other component to it as well, which is obviously the website itself, kind of our minimum viable product for this product or this app. And what this is obviously just a user interface. You can select your language up there. Right now we only have Spanish, just because that's kind of been what we've been testing with. But as you can see, you have all the different articles you can kind of browse through, and then you have a breakdown, and this is kind of the scoring that we used. So you have the composite grammar score, the flesh score, which is actually not machine learning. We kind of worked with a University of Minnesota professor who kind of showed us this, which kind of, if you determine some metrics from it, you can kind of create this score from it. It involves like the length of the sentence as well as the length of certain words. And then obviously the length score, which is the length of the article itself, and the vocab score, that actually comes out of the machine learning algorithm. But this kind of all combines together to create this average score here, which is kind of what you can filter by there with that slider up there. Next slide. And then we also added some other features. Obviously, you can see the demonstration of the slider there. It refiltered the articles. And then we also have a light mode as well, just for accessibility's sake, just for the kind of demonstration purposes. I think with that, we can go to the next slide. So lessons learned, obviously, we spent a lot of time with product ideation. We spent time thinking about which product we wanted to go with, which one is more feasible than the other. Market research as well. A big part was we were in contact with a University of Minnesota language professor, and she kind of gave us a good idea for the project and where it kind of fits in the market. It kind of fulfills a niche thing that we'll talk about in a little bit. And obviously working on a startup project. All of our members have had internships. We're all software engineering students, so we've had an internship in order to graduate, but that's working on existing systems. This was a startup project that we were coming up with ourselves. We had to kind of come up with our own requirements, think up our own design, rather than working with a sponsor like you normally would. And with that, it kind of presented some challenges. We had to actually choose our own architecture, choose the tech stack that we were using. Then what we ended up going with was, part of it was AWS, which is a huge beast to work on. We can talk a little bit more about that after the presentation if you want to ask about all the troubles involving AWS. And then obviously, just to summarize our values again, it does fill a need in the education market. Kind of, if we were to move forward, what we would start doing is starting to target the K through 12 dual language learning approach, because this was kind of what the University of Minnesota professor talked about. Dual language learning programs, say like you're a teacher for a Ukrainian dual language program. Each student kind of comes from a Ukrainian family most often, but they might have different levels of proficiency in that language. It's very hard for teachers to cater to each student. So a tool that kind of helps them do that kind of fulfills a niche market that we're trying to fulfill with this app. And obviously, from there, we could also turn it into a subscription-based model as well. In the case of anyone just wanting like an intermediate to advanced language learner who just wants to read some real-world articles and kind of cater to their interest in their skill level with our app. And then obviously, like I said, marketed to schools and colleges. All right, that concludes our presentation.